After 2 million years of biological evolution, a species of humans using symbolic language and tools emerged between 200 and 300,000 years ago, with a stable social model of small egalitarian networks and a hunter-gatherer culture. 12,000 years ago, a rise in temperature increased the fertility of the land, and humans adapted socially to a farming culture in larger hierarchical networks. 600 years ago, a single disruptive event triggered another sequence of social changes. It is those adaptations which we will explore in this episode. In the control paradigm, social adaptation to agriculture saw the emergence of dominance, power, property, ownership and wealth in human society for the first time. 90% of the population owned nothing, had no wealth and no power. They laboured on land owned by the 2% who controlled everything and accumulated almost all of the wealth produced. The remaining 8% produced goods which they owned and traded. In the process, they accumulated small amounts of wealth. In the 14th century, bubonic plague swept through Europe, killing up to 50% of the population. Before the plague, there had been a surplus of available labour to work on the land. Now there was a deficit. Peasants found themselves in great demand, and they were able to sell their labour for wages, which they could exchange for food, goods and services. The peasants acquired a small amount of power, a degree of control over their own lives. Labour had become a tradable commodity and a way to accumulate wealth. Over time, peasants used the wealth they accumulated from labour to become owners and food producers in their own right. Dignity, respect, rights and autonomy are the pillars of a liberal ideology. In practice, their existence gives people the opportunity to lead a good life, to realise their ambitions and to be fulfilled. For liberal ideology to work in practice, society must deal with difficult questions of balance. How strongly should freedom be valued compared to other social virtues, such as justice and equality? What is the right balance between individual rights and the needs of society as a whole? What is the legitimate role of government, and how should it restrain and enable freedoms? What is the role of markets, and how should they be structured and controlled? How can we promote the rights of minorities without diluting the rights of majorities? What is the right relationship between the institutions of religion and state? How do we balance global obligations to humanity with national obligations to our own population? And what are the limits of freedom in thought, word and action? The transition from control paradigm to liberal paradigm has been underway for 600 years. And politicians, economists, philosophers and sociologists have proposed and implemented a variety of adaptations, but no stable state has yet been reached. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Renaissance revived the curiosity and creativity of the Greeks and Romans, which had been suffocated by the control paradigm. From the 17th century to the early 19th century, the Enlightenment viewed reality as objective and discoverable, truth as singular and universal, and individuals as rational agents. From the 18th century, Romanticism viewed reality as individually and socially subjective, truth as variable and plural, and individuals as emotional, creative beings. In the 16th century, the Reformation challenged the authority of the papacy and the Catholic Church, leading to the emergence of Protestantism. From the middle of the 16th to the end of the 17th centuries, the scientific revolution established science as the dominant source of knowledge. From the mid-18th century to the early 20th century, the Industrial Revolution increased the productivity of manufacturing industry and the supply of goods. From the mid-15th to the mid-18th century, Europeans explored the world by sea to find routes to increase worldwide trade. From the English Civil War of 1639 through to the Russian Revolution of 1917, civil revolution transformed European nations from absolute monarchies to either republics or constitutional monarchies. From the 15th to the 20th centuries, European nations colonized the world and exploited the land, resources and people for their own advantage. Synonymous with empire, conquest, colonization and slavery, mercantilism is an economic philosophy based on private ownership and enterprise, with production and trade controlled by the state. It assumes that total wealth is fixed. One nation's surplus is another's deficit. Capitalism is a liberal economic philosophy based on private ownership and enterprise in free markets, independent of state control. It assumes that total wealth increases through competition, investment, and innovation. Consumerism is complementary to capitalism, the increasing acquisition of goods and services far beyond those necessary for survival. Advances in transportation, communication, and trade have led to globalization, the integration of economies, markets, societies, and cultures, making the world a smaller place. In the last 600 years, the agricultural economy has become a market economy, which has enabled populations to survive and thrive. If we compare society in 1400 to society in 2000, two things are very clear. Populations are much larger, and on average, people have a much higher standard of living. To see why, we will model the impact of social change on populations and wealth, beginning with populations. In the natural paradigm, populations depended on the quantity of food available in an ecosystem for their survival. Agriculture freed humanity from its dependence on nature, and a population survived on the food it produced. Technological advances and increasingly efficient production in the liberal paradigm mean that more and more food can be produced from the same amount of land with less people. Although there is a theoretical limit on food production, we have not reached it yet. We can synthesize the impact of the liberal paradigm on populations using a model which assumes that food production is not a limiting factor. In this model, the total population is shown as separate populations of young people, mature people who are both productive and reproductive, middle-aged people who are no longer reproductive but are still productive, and elderly people who are not reproductive or productive. Each group has its own death rate, and there's a single birth rate. The model also calculates average life expectancy at birth. The base model shows what would have happened if the control paradigm had continued. Populations would have risen from over 300 million to over 400 million as agriculture spread around the world. The model also shows average life expectancy at birth as being less than 30 years throughout the period. But we know that isn't what happened. What actually happened has been much more dramatic. World population grew exponentially, and by the year 2000 was over 7 billion, and average life expectancy more than doubled to over 70. Improvements in sanitation and medical advances from around 1800 reduced death rates considerably, especially in the young. In the 1900s, birth rates began to fall rapidly in post-industrial countries. As a consequence, world population growth rates peaked and are now falling. By reflecting these changes in the model, we can replicate actual changes in population and average life expectancy. A model which represents history can be used to predict the future. If trends continue, population peaks and then begins to fall quite rapidly. Average life expectancy peaks and falls, and age profiles invert. There are proportionally more elderly people and less young. There are already signs of these trends in post-industrial societies. From populations and life expectancy, we now turn to wealth and standards of living. The base model of production reflects the forager culture of the natural paradigm. Goods in the form of food, tools and weapons are produced by hunting, gathering and manufactured by economically active people in the band. Everything which is produced is fully utilized by the band. 30% of the population, the young and the elderly, are economically inactive. The rest are directly involved in food production and manufacture. The standard of living is subsistence level and is the same for everyone. And there is no wealth because there is no excess production to convert to assets. Standard of living is not the same as quality of life. Standard of living is objective and economic, a measure of people's material wealth. It depends on tangibles like income, consumption, housing, and access to utilities. Quality of life is subjective and relative. It depends on intangibles like autonomy, well-being, relationships, enjoyment, and fulfillment. In the control paradigm, agriculture is a more efficient process than foraging. More food and goods are produced. Not everything produced is utilized by the population. Excess production is converted to assets through trade and becomes wealth. A small percentage of the economically active in the hierarchy are not productive, for example, the aristocracy. The wealth produced is held by a small minority who retain it as gold, silver, and property. The majority remain at the subsistence level, living on what they are allowed to keep by the minority. The standard of living of the wealthy minority increases, but the standard of living of the majority does not. The average hardly changes. In the liberal paradigm version of the model, from the late 18th century, profit from production is reinvested in research, development and automation. Efficiency increases and many more goods are produced. In the 20th century, freedom of choice and the welfare state increase the proportion of the population which is economically active but non-productive. Changes in aid profile in the population increase the number who are economically inactive. Wealth increases, even allowing for reinvestment, reducing the amount of excess production converted to retained assets. Even though wealth is still not equally shared, the average standard of living increases considerably. In future, if nothing changes, the standard of living peaks and falls. In this situation, standards of living can only be maintained by selling assets or borrowing. This is unsustainable. Something must change. Again, these trends are already visible in post-industrial societies. These theoretical models are realistic representations of trends in some societies, but many are at earlier stages of both population and economic development. We'll now look at some actual demographics for the UK. In the natural paradigm, 70% of the population were economically active and directly or indirectly involved in food production. In the control paradigm, the economically active engaged in food production dropped to around 54%. The remaining 16% of the economically active were either involved in manufacturing of goods and trade or non-productive activities such as government, the religion, or the military. By the end of the 20th century in the liberal paradigm, the situation is very different. In the UK, the proportion of the population which is economically active in any way is less than 50%, the remainder being economically inactive due to age, choice, or incapacity. Of those who are economically active, only 17%, that's 8.5% of the total population, are producing goods which can be utilised or converted to wealth. Populations and birth rates in the UK have generally followed those in the models. Populations have risen dramatically, but birth rates have fallen equally dramatically. Nonlinear changes in birth and death rates have altered the relativity of age groups within the population. Whereas the age group from 0 to 15 was historically the largest group, it is now the smallest. The Industrial Revolution caused mass migration from villages to towns and cities. In the Middle Ages, around 95% of the population lived in rural areas. In England, in 1800, over 65% of the population still lived in the countryside. By 2020, that had reduced to 80%, almost a complete reversal. Energy consumption per person has increased dramatically as society has evolved. From a maximum of 4,000 kilocalories per person per day for foragers to 250,000 kilocalories per person per day in the modern UK, about 60 times as much. Given that population has multiplied by over 2,000 times, this is a staggering increase in total energy consumption of 120,000 times in 12,000 years. In liberal societies, religion has shifted from being compulsory to being a matter of choice. In the UK, for example, in the 16th century, 100% of the population identified as Christian, and church attendance was mandatory by law. By 2020, less than half the population identified themselves as Christian, and less than 5% attended church weekly. Freedom of religion in the UK is now enshrined in law, and there are many recognised religions. Even so, the number identifying as religious is only just over 50%. The impact of religion has declined in the three key areas identified in the episode on the control paradigm: explanation, cohesion, and morality. Explanation is the source of knowledge. Increasingly, scientific knowledge replaces religious belief as the explanation of existence. But there are some important questions which science has not and maybe cannot answer. Where did everything that exists come from? How did life emerge from inanimate material? What happens to the self after death? Is there a purpose to life and the universe? Currently, the answers to those questions remain a matter of belief, not knowledge. Cohesion is the glue that holds society together. It builds strength and order with a shared identity, values, and beliefs. Shared religious beliefs, religious identity, and communal activity make an important contribution to social cohesion. In the liberal paradigm, with its focus on minority rights and pluralism, increasing dependence on state institutions rather than local communities, there is no common culture or interdependency to build and maintain cohesion. Only nationalism can give a shared sense of identity, and only morality and governance can maintain social order. Morality is the categorization of behavior as good and bad. In the natural paradigm, behavioral norms were the basis of morality, and in the control paradigm, doctrine added a formal behavioral framework. To explain the impact of the liberal paradigm on morality, we'll use a behavior model from an earlier episode. Human individuals have agency, and individual action is motivated by the gap between a desirable goal and current status. We act to close the gap or to prevent it widening. As sentient beings, we learn from our experiences, and as autonomous beings, we choose to act in the ways which we believe will most effectively and efficiently deliver our goals. If we were solitary animals, that would be all there is to behavior. But we are social animals. We depend on other people in our social network for our survival. Our individual behavior is regulated by interaction with others to build collective strength, to maintain order, and to maximize efficiency. Other people judge our actions and react accordingly. We learn from those reactions and act in ways which give us positive reactions as well as delivering our goals. Judgments are made against common standards of behavior, what is good or bad, right or wrong, acceptable or not. Those standards are what we call morality. Behavior which meets the standards is moral. Behavior which deviates from the standard is immoral. In the natural paradigm, goals are survival needs: air, food, water, warmth, security, sleep, and sex. Morality is a set of behavioral norms which evolve by natural selection. In the control paradigm, in addition to survival needs, there are goals in the form of duties, obligations arising from roles and status. Morality is also determined by authority. The powerful decide what is good and bad behavior. In the liberal paradigm, we add another set of goals, aspirations. Everyone is free to choose goals which will bring them fulfillment and a good life, what will enable them to thrive as well as survive. In principle, social regulation is incompatible with individual freedom, but in society, one person's freedom depends on the actions of others. Liberalism requires mutual respect and a balance of rights and responsibilities. Regulation of behavior is necessary to promote and protect rights, freedoms, and equality for all. In the liberal paradigm, morality is a matter of political consensus, determined collectively by discussion, argument, debate, and reason. In today's world, goals are a combination of needs, duties, and aspirations, depending on the nature of society, and morality is a combination of norms, decree, and consensus. Liberal principles include freedom, diversity, and pluralism, which act against decree and consensus, and morality in liberal society is a mix of formal rules and variable norms. In liberal society, government and institutions cannot rely on dominance, power, or authority to legitimize decision-making, coordination, and regulation. They act only with the consent and cooperation of the people. Governance is a balance of the rights and responsibilities of the governing and the people being governed. Government has the responsibility to promote and protect liberty, equal opportunity, dignity, and respect for all, and the right to make laws, coordinate activities, and regulate the behavior of the people. The people have the responsibility to obey the law, cooperate with government, and accept the consequences if they don't, and the right to influence the law and change the government within a legitimate political system. A culture of mutual accountability maintains the balance between anarchy and authoritarianism and keeps liberal society as a whole regulated, orderly, and stable. We turn now to the structure and function of society in the liberal paradigm, beginning with structure. The formation of networks in populations of social animals is a natural consequence of interdependence and interaction. The twin goals of population survival and individual fulfillment make people interdependent, which causes regular and frequent interaction. In the social networks of the natural paradigm, interactions are personal and relationships are based on mutual trust. In the control paradigm, hierarchical interactions and relationships based on obedience are added. Moral interactions increase cohesion, a measure of solidarity in communities. Cooperative interactions increase efficiency, a measure of performance. Together, social cohesion and efficiency determine the probability of survival and fulfillment. Whilst distinct, cohesion and efficiency are interdependent. Increased cohesion increases collaboration and cooperation, which increase efficiency, and increased efficiency increases trust and bonding, which increase cohesion. Combined, cohesion and efficiency in communities are the source of social capital. As populations grow, it is no longer practical to build networks based solely on personal relationships. A new type of network emerges in the liberal paradigm, a financial network. In a financial network, people are not individuals and groups functioning in communities. Instead, they are people in roles and institutions functioning in markets. In financial networks, people occupy roles. In one context, they are consumers, customers, clients, students, patients, members, and citizens. In another, they are builders, doctors, teachers, counsellors, lawyers, engineers, or soldiers. And in another, they are members of institutions such as shops, schools, hospitals, churches, governments, military, or utilities. In a financial network, roles and institutions are interdependent, and interactions are transactions. Relationships are professional, not personal, and the currency is money, not trust. Cohesion, the strength of a market, is a function of ethical behavior between trading partners. Efficiency comes from coordination of transactions through enforceable contracts. In the liberal paradigm, cohesion and efficiency of markets determine survival and fulfillment, and they combine to generate financial capital. By way of comparison, consider the way we satisfy the most important human need of all, the need to eat. In the natural paradigm, we foraged for food, prepared it, cooked it, and ate it together as a band. The whole band shared in the process and the benefits. Throughout the control paradigm, local communities grew their own food on farms in villages. They prepared, cooked, and ate their food in the family home. Food was preserved and stored for future consumption by the community. In the liberal paradigm, as customers, we shop for food in a supermarket, or we order it for delivery and we pay for it. Then we eat it or store it. Or we go to a restaurant. We order food. The chef prepares and cooks the food. The waiter brings it to our table and we eat it. Then we pay for it. Or we get food at the takeaway. We pay for it and eat it. In the liberal paradigm, interaction is transactional, relationships are professional, and survival is financial. Some of the consequences of the transition from social to financial networks have been increased dependency on the market and reduced dependency on the community. Increased dependency on institutions, laws, rules, and ethics instead of reciprocity, norms, and morals. And to transfer intrinsic trust in each other to extrinsic trust in money, the market, and institutions. Society as a whole is a complex adaptive system. The system has 3 inputs and 2 outputs. The inputs are energy from the sun and material and organic resources from the earth. The outputs are survival and well-being. Society is a set of interacting subsystems which become increasingly complex as society and culture evolve and grow. In the natural paradigm, the subsystems were subsistence, manufacture, education, welfare, religion, regulation, security, which combine to deliver survival and well-being in forager bands. As an example, this is the subsistence system in the natural paradigm. Its function is to extract enough energy from the ecosystem to enable the band to survive. To model forager society as a whole, we would add other subsystems and include their interactions. For example, education determines levels of knowledge and skills. Manufacture of tools and weapons affects efficiency, and regulation increases levels of cooperation and efficiency. As populations have grown and technology has advanced in the control and liberal paradigms, many new systems have been added, making society increasingly complex. Humans are the adaptive agents in social systems, and we are constantly making changes to parts of systems with the aim of improving outputs. Unfortunately, most of those changes are made with no regard for the impact on other parts, other subsystems, the system as a whole, or other systems affected by human society. Adapting parts of complex systems has side effects and unforeseen consequences which have negative impacts requiring further adaptations. As the proverb says, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When social networks and systems adapt by either natural selection or human intervention, change is a process of trial and error. Something different is tried, and if it improves the performance of the network or system, it's retained. If not, it's rejected and something else is tried. This approach has resulted in some highly desirable outcomes in the last 600 years. There have been significant increases in population size, life expectancy, wealth, quality of life and standard of living. Conflict between societies has reduced, and humanity as a whole is experiencing a period of relative peace. Starvation and many infectious diseases have been virtually eliminated. But there are other consequences. The models show that as liberalism matures, population size, average life expectancy, wealth and standards of living peak and then decline. If that happens, pluralism of values, beliefs and norms in liberal society, the lack of cohesion and shared identity, and dependence on mutual accountability of government and people could easily lead to breakdown of social order. Energy use, resource consumption and pollution have an impact on the planet's environmental systems, which in turn has a significant impact on human life. And human behaviour is causing species extinction on a scale not seen since the disappearance of the dinosaurs over 60 million years ago. Extinction rates are hundreds of times background rates and accelerating. We have no clear understanding of the potential impact on our ecosystems and ourselves. To be stable and sustainable, culture and society must continue to adapt to retain the benefits and to mitigate the risks. Systems and networks adapt to changing circumstances in one of two ways. They either revert to less complex, more stable systems and networks, or they advance to new stable states which are as yet undefined and unknown. Whichever way our current societies evolve, there's a good chance that the human species will survive. But to retain the benefits and mitigate the risks, we must progress to something new, not revert to either the natural or control paradigms. To do that, we would do well to listen to Albert Einstein, who said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Humanity has a choice. We can leave the future to trial and error, or we can design and plan the future we want. Effective design requires an openness to a new world view and changes in the way we think, the way we make decisions, and the way we act. We will explore the design option in future episodes.